Well, what's up, again there, guys? Brian here, D3 Topics Gamer, here to share with you another one of my worst to best ranking videos. This time I'll be tackling one of the all-time greatest science fiction franchises in cinema history, the Terminator franchise. Now, while the franchise is currently in a very, very depressing state, I thought it would be great if I went back and ranked all of the current 6 official films in the series and just give you my personal opinion on each and every single one of them. Now, before I get into my personal ranking, if you happen to enjoy this video by the end, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and make sure to press the subscribe button if you happen to enjoy content like this from me and would like to see more from me moving forward. And before I get into my official ranking, I would like to note that this video will contain spoilers, so you have been warned. So let's start off with the number 6 place Terminator film, and without doubt the worst Terminator film in this series. Okay, now quite easily, number 6 and the worst Terminator film of all time has to go to the most recent one, and that is Terminator Dark Fate, which I'm just going to confess right now, I haven't even seen this film from beginning to end, and that is because I could not get past the first 5 minutes. I paid actual full price money to see this film in theaters and walked out in the first 5 minutes. Why? Because I saw quite literally the worst scene in Terminator history when they flat out, spoiler alert, kill off John Connor. Now, I had heard rumors that this was going to happen. I had heard rumors. I was even warned by a couple of people that I trust had actually seen the film ahead of me, but I thought they were bullshit. I said, there's no way that the studios and James Cameron himself would sign off on a script that would kill off John Connor in the first 5 minutes. I mean, this is James Cameron we're talking about. This is the guy who created Terminators 1 and 2. This is the guy that was pissed off that with Alien 3 that they pretty much killed off Hicks and Newt in the first 5 minutes, pretty much making Alien and Alien just completely pointless films, and now they decided to do the same thing with Terminators 1 and 2. There's no way they would do that. But that is what happened. And I was literally livid. And I just think that there was no way this film could come back. There was no way it could recover. And there was no way this film could do anything in the entire length of the film that could justify that decision. And it turns out, from those of my friends that actually managed to somehow sit through that entire film, clarified this. This film apparently doesn't do anything to justify this decision. And it just gets worse. Now, this stupid SJW wokeness politics bullshit that has been infecting the Hollywood series, the Hollywood environment for like the past number of years, has been infecting some of my all-time favorite franchises like a goddamn virus. This thing is more contagious than the coronavirus, because at least the coronavirus might be gone in a year or two, but I have no idea when this whole wokeness wave is going to stop. And just, no, just, like, oh, just, you can't do that. You make one of my favorite movies of all time, probably one of the greatest sequels of all time, and Terminator 2 is dead center tied with The Dark Knight in terms of taking the 2 spot of being my all-time favorite film of all time. And in the first 5 minutes, you make it completely pointless. It's so bad, I can't even trust James Cameron with a Terminator film. I can't trust him with the series. The man has become a threat to Terminator. If James Cameron came out tomorrow and said that he wanted to produce, script, and direct a Terminator film to act as a proper sequel to Terminator 2, I wouldn't trust him with it. That's how bad it is. I do not trust James Cameron to come anywhere near Terminator, and it is because of this movie. This is the film that killed the Terminator franchise permanently, and I hope to God they never make another Terminator film after this. But heck, chances are they're going to do that because fuck you, give us your money. But that's all I can say. So that is without question why Terminator Dark Fate is by far the worst Terminator film of all time. On to number 5. Now, number 5 is going to surprise some people because this too does something that is kind of similar to the first 5 minutes of Dark Fate, but not quite as bad. Perhaps more stupid, but not quite as bad. And it has to go to Terminator Salvation. Now, I will give Terminator Salvation this. I will give it credit for not following the recycled plot line of sending a Terminator back through time to save someone. And it actually takes place during the actual war for humanity that we actually saw glimpses of in Terminators 1 and 2. So we kind of saw what we wanted to see. And the movie does make some attempt to try to tell its own unique story and lead up into certain events, so I'll give it credit with that. But the reason this is so low is because even though Dark Fate has probably the worst scene in Terminator history, there's a scene in this film that is so unbelievably stupid. It has forever removed any sense that Skynet was a legitimate threat in the entire Terminator franchise. Now, if you just stick with me, but I haven't seen this film since I saw it in theaters in like '09, so it's been like well over a decade. But this scene is forever burned into my mind, and I just was in total shock. But apparently, at some point, the main character, not Christian Bale's character, because he plays John Connor. At some point, he gets like captured by Skynet, and he gets repaired, and you find out from the trails that he's actually a Terminator. The guy that the Sam guy plays, I think his name is Marcus. I think I don't know. Correct me in the comments. But apparently, Skynet reveals that they have captured Kyle Reese. They've had him for 2 days. And what's worse is that they know he is John Connor's father. And their big plan is we're going to keep Kyle Reese alive. So when John Connor comes to rescue him, we can then kill him then. So, you have Kyle Reese, you know who he is somehow, and you're keeping him alive instead of just killing him. What? Did your AI just totally malfunction after dropping those nukes? That is the single dumbest thing I've ever seen. And from that point, Skynet is no longer a threat. If it can make such a stupid decision, I don't know what is. And it gets a little bit worse later on, because at some point near the end, I think John Connor gets stabbed in the heart, and they have to perform some sort of heart transplant. Now, look, I'm not a doctor, but I'm fairly certain you can't just take out someone else's heart and put it in another person's body and save them. I mean, there's a reason why we have blood types and organ types, and so I'm not even sure if the two primary main characters are compatible. But there's movie disbelief, and then there's get the fuck out of here, and that was a get the fuck out of your part. So the fact that this film has quite literally the single dumbest scene in Terminator history, to the point where it has ruined any credibility of the threat. And what happens with John Connor at the end is just dumb, because he's basically dead, but they come up with some Deus Ex Machina bullshit to try to save him. It's too painful. It's too painful that, just like Dark Fate, I refuse to watch this film again, and I haven't, and I'm going on like 12 years running. But and what's crazy is I seem to be the only person who remembers why that scene was as bad as it was. I mean, that nearly single-handedly ruined the film. I mean, by that point, I had already sat through most of the film, so I had to stick through it. But yeah, that is why that Terminator Salvation is ranked 5th on my list, and I don't know what else to say. So yeah, let's go to number 4. Now, ranked 4th on my list is actually when these Terminator films actually started getting much better, in my opinion. And ranked 4th on my list is actually going to have to go to Terminator Genesis. Now, to be fair, Terminator Genesis actually does something a little bit similar to Dark Fate, in the sense that while Dark Fate pretty much made Terminators 1 and 2 pointless, Genesis ostensibly wipes them from existence entirely. However, here's the difference. They actually managed to introduce some elements and some storyline plots that I actually don't mind. I mean, if you're gonna take Terminator 1 and 2 and just wipe them from out of existence and do something different, you better have a pretty good explanation or a good reason. And they actually have some pretty cool concepts that I actually was very intrigued with. The biggest one being that you actually have a storyline in which a Terminator was actually sent back to kill Sarah Connor when she was much younger, and another Terminator was sent to rescue her, and especially spends like I believe 10 years raising Sarah Connor. So this character, who is notoriously a big Terminator hater, gets raised by one and has this kind of mother-father relationship. Now, this is an idea that very much was brought up in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, when Sarah Connor, at one point, when she was seeing John interact with the Terminator, was thinking maybe Terminators would make better parents. And this is a clear example of that. This concept of a Terminator raising a human, I thought was absolutely fascinating. And the fact that they managed to take a few elements from the films and take it in a different direction, I thought was actually cool. They actually managed to go through the primary plot of Terminator 1 relatively quickly. And while the whole John Connor becoming the main antagonist would have been really cool if they didn't spoil that in the trailer, which whoever allowed that to get in the trailer needed to be fired. I think that going in a different direction, trying something different, and actually introducing some really cool concepts was a very good idea, and why I actually have seen this a number of times and generally do enjoy Genesis. And surprisingly, it's the only Terminator film in which Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't die, so that's an interesting concept. He's died in every single one of them in one fashion or another, except Genesis. So, yeah, not bad. I actually did have a little bit of fun. It does cause a little bit of damage to some hardcore fans, but overall, I actually generally do like what Genesis did, and I'm okay with it. So that's why I would place it as number 4 on my list. The number 3 on my list is gonna have to go to Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, and the reason it takes a number 3 spot is because, to me, Terminator 3 is the only film that, in a whole, does not do anything to harm the series in general. It doesn't really progress it, but it doesn't hurt it in any sense. The whole point of Terminator 3, realistically, is not to stop Judgment Day, but to make sure that John Connor and his wife Catherine Brewster actually survive Judgment Day in order to fight the war. Therefore, they can actually do the things that they need to do in terms of sending the Terminators back eventually, which surprisingly actually has some really cool connections to a recent Terminator video game in the form of Terminator Resistance, which I must say, surprisingly good Terminator game. Probably the best Terminator game I've ever played, for anyone who's interested in it. It's actually pretty good with its story, and this actually would have served as a good leadway into that game that ultimately shows how the whole time displacement thing and start seeing the Terminators back things actually work. This is the only film that comes the closest to actually telling a full cycle storyline, and I think when it comes to time travel movies, you need to do that kind of thing. But that's just my opinion. So, yeah, it has some decent action. I thought the TX was an interesting idea. The idea of taking a Terminator and pretty much combining it with a T1000. And its original plot and its original mission was never to kill John Connor. It was to wipe out his lieutenants. So it's like, if we can't kill John Connor, we'll just kill the people around John Connor, maybe make his job a little bit harder. And that TX ran to John Connor completely by accident, and the movie just keeps going and never really slows down from that point on. It does have a couple of emotional moments and some pretty neat little cameo moments in there, but overall, I think that Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines has some great action, some interesting story elements, and without doubt, does the least to harm the series. I mean, Genesis and Dark Fate and Salvations actually do things that might piss off some fans, but I don't really see a reason why most people would hate Rise of the Machines. It may not be great, but it's certainly not awful. I would say it's just kind of average, and that's enough for me to give it the number 3 spot on my list. Number 2, of course, has to go to the very, very first Terminator film. This is the film that started it all, and really, in my opinion, is a true classic film. I mean, this is another one of the must-see classics to anyone that is just looking for a good time. And it kind of adds a little bit of action and horror, kind of similar to something like Alien, in which you're only dealing with like just just like one of these things, and it kind of has like that horror feeling. And so to see Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor try to go from place to place, trying to survive, being constantly hunted by this unstoppable killing, this literal killing machine, is really quite interesting, and it sets up the rules for exactly what the Terminator franchise would, try to develop into as best it could, which I don't think it eventually got to that point. But if you take back to where the franchise started, it still holds up. It's still a fantastic film. A lot of real cool practical effects that, if you look at them, you can tell they're practical and kind of fake. Some pretty humorous moments. There's some very, very heartfelt moments. And, it really does do an amazing job of setting up a great franchise. It's a classic in my opinion, which is why, Terminator 1 is easily going to be the number 2 best Terminator film in the series, even after all these decades. But heck, it may be number 2, but there's only one other film in this series that has to take number 1, and that film is obviously going to have to go to Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I really don't know how anyone could even debate that this is without doubt the greatest Terminator film of all time. Not only that, it's probably one of the greatest science fiction action films of all time, one of the greatest sequels of all time. As I said earlier in this film, this movie is seriously dead tied with The Dark Knight as being my second favorite film of all time. The only film that stands above both The Dark Knight and Terminator 2 is Inception, but that's a discussion for another time. But this film is simply a masterpiece. Terminator 1 is a classic, Terminator 2 is a masterpiece. This thing has excellent special effects that still hold up to this day. This film has great performances across the board. There is so much heavy emotion, just everything that you could ask for in a perfect summer blockbuster film that will go on to still have a lasting reputation after all of these years is embedded into this film. This is without question an absolutely must-see film for anyone who's an action fan. And I'll even say this. There are not many movies that it is universally acceptable for grown-ass men to cry at. But I will say this. If you are a grown man and you don't at least get emotional about the ending of this film, you simply do not have a soul. Because I can't even watch this film with other people because I don't want them to see me get emotional. Every time I watch Terminator 2, I have to watch it by myself. Because that ending gets me every single time, and I've seen this film well over 100 times, and I still get a thrill every time I see this film, which is why, unquestionably, Terminator 2 Judgment Day will always be the greatest Terminator film of all time, and easily one of the greatest films in general of all time. So, that is my ranking of all 6 of the current Terminator films in this series. Now, if you guys have seen these films, how would you rank them from worst to best? Share your ranking with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.